Hey guys, welcome to another episode of R-Rated Christianity. Your eyes are not deceiving you. There's not a punching bag behind me. There's not a rig or weights. You don't have a infrared sauna beside me. We are not in our garage anymore. The studio, the casita is done. Almost done. Most pretty much done. Kind of done. We're in the new office studio. We're still going to tighten it up. We got a different lighting, maybe, but the lights are good to go. David did a great job. Jeff and Tyler organized everything and made the transfer, and George and I are here. And so we're going to hopefully continue to get it better. But these are our new, what's they say, the new digs. Is that how you say it? We're going to have to get used to the new cameras. There's going to be another camera over there next week for George. This one's here for me. We got one in the middle. I don't know. I just listen. We just try to take directions. But for those of you that are here for the first time or will watch this later on for the first time, welcome. This is a R-Rated Christianity. The R stands for real, raw, and redemptive. We have real conversations. We do it, yes, in a very raw way. But hopefully, and our desire is that it leads you to think yourself through to a redemptive relationship with a first century Jew named Jesus. And that's the whole goal. This is an apologetics podcast. It comes from the Greek word apologia, to give an answer or a defense. And Jesus doesn't need us to defend him, but we should be able to answer questions. That's 1 Peter 3:15 says, always be prepared to give an answer to anyone who asks why you have the hope within you. 2 Timothy 2:15 says, do your best to show yourself approved to God, a worker who is not embarrassed to properly handle the word of truth. That's what we try to do. We go straight into the scripture. We want to know what God expects us to know.
Yes.
We want to do the best we can to do what God expects us to do. And then let the chips fall where they may, as we say. So we try to tackle topics and subject matter and issues that typical churches won't maybe tackle from the pulpit, but we will through a biblical lens and analyze it, think through it, critically think through it, spar with ideas in your mind, because you have to give the why. And really, George, our topic tonight really is very relevant to kind of our passion. The idea that Christianity and influence of Christianity is dwindling. I shouldn't say dwindling. That sounds pretty bad, but hyperbolic. But is definitely lost its influence in our country. I think we see that in sports. I think we see that in government for sure. We see that in corporations. We see that with families. We see that Hollywood, everywhere.
Yes.
Even in churches, and that's what we're going to talk about today. I mean, it's a segue into the churches. Even churches are losing their Christian influence.
Yes.
Christian churches.
Yeah, I would say particularly in churches, because that's where it should be most concentrated.
Right.
And I like your first word, the better.
Which one?
Dwindling.
Well, okay, fair enough.
I think it is. I think it's dropping significantly. And people listening to this show over the last few years, Nico, are probably thinking, man, we're just such negative Nancy's over here,
I'm not a transgender.
I knew you were going to. I knew it.
You knew it. You gave me too
threw
much.
that out there.
I'm still listening.
It was 4
Yep.
years.
What?
It was 4 years this week
Is
that
it?
we're celebrating our.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it popped up on my Facebook wall
Yes.
that first night that we were over at Jubal's place, and
Yeah.
No shit.
Yeah.
so
Well, there you go.
So if people look over
what,
4
right.
years,
It was May 4 years ago, George. We were in Salo and Edith's, the first show. No. Where was that?
I remember
it was in a studio first. It was Jubal.
headquarters.
Jubal Garcia? I saw him, had lunch with him yesterday. So Jubal Garcia, pastor, we were in his headquarters the first, but then we transferred to Saulo and Edith's house for a little while. And then where did we go?
We went to
Everywhere.
Elliot's place.
Yeah, we're everywhere, man. We're like gypsies, Christian gypsies, just traveling, whoever would take us in. And then we eventually just invested into our own equipment. And here we are. We stuck in a garage for years. And then
okay. So 4 years. I thought it was maybe around two to three, but time flies.
Yeah.
So across those 4 years, the topics that we discussed, we it's true. I want to make a confession here. Maybe you think differently, but it's true. I think if people listen to us before we share the good news of Jesus Christ, we share dark news. We share some very, very bad news about what's going on in the culture. But that is not the nature of apologetics. You're providing a rationally compelling defense of the Christian worldview. The assumption is that we're under attack, that worldview is under attack. So how do you spin that in a positive way?
Yeah.
I mean, attacks are generally not positive. So that's what we talk a lot about in here. What's going on in the culture? How can we influence the culture? And we can't do that without talking about how the church is being attacked. The worldview of Christianity is I think what we're talking about tonight, and how that's dwindling. And that's true. The data, you've shared the 9% number.
Yeah,
right?
it's less, right?
For years. And I think it was about a week and a half ago. I
Well,
sent you
give
this-
context to the 9% because you just said it. You assumed
Yeah,
it.
that 9% comes from, it was a
Well, what
survey.
9% of what?
So there's those who identify as Christians, right? And then there's those who actually hold a biblical worldview. A biblical worldview, any worldview, generically speaking, is how you hear or how you experience and
See.
interpret reality, all of reality. A biblical worldview is the idea that you hear, you interpret, and you respond to reality in light of biblical perspectives that you have that are what? They're informed by the Word of God, right? God's principles and God's commands. And so the idea here is basically every single choice that you make, you actively pursue making that choice through, the word it uses, lens, through the lens of the Lord Jesus Christ, how he looks at the world and what he holds dear. There's a very stark difference. So we've been throwing out 70-ish, anywhere from 70 to 75. It's fluctuated there. We went way back to 2007, where it was 78.4. That was a Pew Research Institute. 78.4 identified as Christians
In the country.
And they've been talking about how that identification number has been dropping. Well, they're not the only ones that are saying that. George Barna, who's a pretty prolific surveyor and researcher out there, he's been saying the same thing. Gallup's been tracking the same thing. The number of people who identify themselves as Christian
Like 63.
has been dropping.
What is it now?
And so now, if you go to the Cultural Research Center at Arizona Christian University, it's the latest one. We've looked at others from Lifeway Research. You guys can look this up. The American Family and Culture Institute. You and I have tracked this pretty avidly in some of our seminars for about 7 years. The point is there's agreement. And so
What is it today? What's the latest numbers?
the latest number is around 69% from the Cultural Research Center at Arizona Christian University. 69% is a significant drop here. There seems to be about a percent drop every year.
Well, actually, I'm more encouraged. I thought it was 63. So 69 actually makes me feel better. Not that it's great, but I'm just saying I thought it was 63.
Yeah, that's actually believe in God. You're remember we did about a month or two ago, the number of Americans who actually believe in God seems to be dropping.
Okay.
So the number, that can be any God.
Right.
Speaking of syncretism.
Yeah.
That can be any God. I'm focusing on people who specifically identify themselves as Christians. And by definition, then you would be talking about the Christian God, Jehovah, right? That number's been dropping as well. So we separate that number out, Nico, from those who actually share a biblical worldview. We interpret reality through God's principles and commandments, and we actually pursue trying to live our lives in ways that please him. That number it's getting so low. I think that, I don't know how much lower it can get. I shouldn't say that. So about 3 years ago, it was around 9%. The American Family and Culture Institute had said that the number of people actually hold that worldview is only about 9%. And we were waving sort of the alarm flags over it. That number has dropped to 4%. And among millennials, it's 2%.
So look, let that sink in. So what we're saying is, what you're saying, the data tells us that the Christian influence, or people that identify, there's a word, right, as Christian, has dropped to 69% of the country. That doesn't mean that they're really Christian, but they just identify as a Christian.
That's right. Americans, yes, that's right.
And within that 69%, roughly 4% hold a biblical worldview.
Correct.
Of the 69%.
And that's averaging across 4 sets of generations. You've got millennials, and we talked about in here. I'm going to use the Barna definition, Jeff. I know that these were fluctuating all over the place. Millennials are people born between 1984 and 2002.
Okay.
Then there's Gen X, people born, it's the latest one, people born in 2003. So they looked at millennials, not Gen X, that's Gen Z. They didn't look at Gen Z. Gen Z is even more dismal. But millennials are 2%. Going backwards, Gen X, people in my generation, born between 1965 and 1983.
That's what?
That's Gen X.
Okay, that's what
So it would be you and me. And then you got to go back to baby boomers. Those were basically our parents. We're baby busters. Our parents were baby boomers.
Okay.
All right. So they were born between 1946 and 1965, 1964 or so. And then you have the elders, anybody who's 77 years older, even before them. And so those numbers are pathetic. They're hovering right around 9%. Millennials.
Of what? Of Christians or of,
yes.
Of biblical? No.
9% wholly biblical.
Of the old timers? There's no way.
Yeah, that's correct.
9% of the old timers.
That's correct.
Then where the hell is the 69% coming from?
That's the identification number. They simply identify themselves.
Oh, you're talking about biblical worldview.
I'm talking about biblical worldview. Okay. Biblical worldview is the kind of stuff we ought to be talking about. The 69% wouldn't bother me so much if they were all holding to an actual, because then we change the world.
Yeah.
That's the problem though. Yeah. It doesn't matter how many people are freaking going to church. It just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many butts are in pews.
I agree.
What matters is, are you externalizing that in your daily life and decisions that you make and how you're engaging with culture? And the answer is absolutely not. Millennials at 2%. And they think that where they really saw this happening was during the pandemic. The pandemic, Barna argues, was a way to expose this because of how people responded to a perceived crisis. And it showed how the responses were significantly different based on the generation.
Well,
which doesn't surprise us.
It's interesting you said that. I was talking to someone today, and I say this all the time, and it's held to be true, no matter what the circumstances. If you want to find out someone's true character, you give them power or problems. Yeah. Power or perceived power. Even if they think, whether it's a worker and they made it to manager or GM or some type of political figure or money or influence, authority, whatever, whether it's actual or perceived, give them power, you'll find out their true character.
Yeah, that's right.
Give them problems, you'll find out their true character.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's interesting that you said that about that.
Yeah, that's right. Harsh situations tend to strip us down to the nuts and bolts of what we're made of and the things we hold dear. I like to use the word, I don't know where I heard it, was probably about 30 years ago, but I like the notion. I was a professor in sociology of religion. He called them crutches. It'll expose your crutches.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, what are you using to crutch yourself up, to support yourself in life? A crisis will expose that. I think you're absolutely right. So the pandemic really provided kind of a laboratory for us to see, what is it that you hold?
Well, I think the question begs to be asked, and we've talked about it on the show before over and over again. But how did that happen? How did we get here? How do we go from a Christian country in ideology, in setup, in foundation? I mean, so much so that in 1954, and I know it's 54 to 56 by the time it got done, but we put on our exchange of money, on our exchange of value, where we negotiated and we gave some, in God we trust. That sentiment and that culture, the way we do things, the way we think, was so pervasive and prevalent in this country previous to 1956 and 54, 56, that it finally culminated, that it was actually placed on our coins, on our exchange of value. How do we go from that? And I think we talked about this on a sidebar. For Easter, Resurrection Day, I showed you guys that picture.
Yes, of course.
From 1956, New York City. Yeah. And in the picture they showed the buildings. I mean, it wasn't the Empire State Building or the towers or anything, but it was these three significant buildings, and there was crosses, there were lights illuminated in a cross in New York City.
There were skyscrapers,
right? I mean, and now that was in 56. That's not that long. I don't know what, 70 years ago, almost like 65. Yeah, whatever. But I mean, it's not that long ago. We go from that to this, to where we're at today. And I'm a root cause dude. I think you have it on.
Forgive me. Yeah.
That's right. I'm a root cause dude.
Forgive me.
I'm a root cause dude. And so I want to figure out forget the symptom. I want to know what happened, what that did. And I think syncretism is part of it. I think lack of courage, and we'll explain what syncretism here in a second. Lack of courage. I think we're getting away from actually teaching authentic theology, and then, as you always argue, it's just systematic theology.
That's what Barna says.
I think. Oh, really? Okay, I didn't realize that. Well, I mean, this is just.
That's what Barna says.
Well, I think it's a combination. Yeah. Not syncretism, but synergistically, you look at all this and you say, holy shit. I mean, we've gotten away from everything. Number one, nobody knows what they believe. And the reason why, and now Barna did a study, and you've heard me use this a lot, George, but obviously I'm sure it's different now. I think they did a study, and I don't know how many people, maybe you'll know it when I say it. They asked pastors, how many of you believe that that the Bible, the biblical worldview, Christian ideology is the answer, will give you the answers to our life's ailments. And something like 90% of the pastors believe that. Then the second question was, well, how many of you teach it? 10%.
Yeah.
Because are you kidding me? I don't want to piss people off. And
Sure.
it's going to seem like we're exclusive and this, and we're not welcoming and all this other bullshit. Okay. all the fake arguments, the red herrings and the straw man arguments. But then at that time, I know it's changed now. It was interesting but at that time, that number, when you looked at all the people that held a biblical worldview, looked and identified and rationalized the world through the Bible philosophy, it was 9%. Mm-hmm. So only 10 at the time, and I'm sure at the time, 10% of pastors taught that the Bible, that collection of books, God's word, is the answer to societal ailments, and only 9% of Christians believed in a biblical world. And what I'm saying is there was correlation.
Yeah.
Nobody's being taught shit. We don't know what we believe.
Yeah, I don't know which study specifically focused on pastors, but it's kind of irrelevant to me because you see that in the other surveys. I mean, pastors are people too, and they're among those who are Christian and identify as Christian and who theoretically hold a biblical worldview. If you look at millennials at 2% right now, their parents, which are my generation, typically, it's only 5%. That's absurd. So millennials are about 1 in 50. Only 1 in 50 Christians actually hold a biblical worldview. 1 millennial and 50 Christian millennials. That's abysmally small. But when you've got Gen Xers who are only 5%, I mean, what are we teaching our kids? I think that's the bottom line here. So what's going on? What's the issue? I think you touched on the fact that we don't know what we believe, we don't teach it, and we frankly don't have the courage to teach it if it goes against the cultural grain, which gets us into syncretism.
We can't reason our way. Every time that I talk to somebody about a Christian ideology or a biblical worldview, I think I take my cues, and I didn't do it intentionally, but I think as I've grown in my walk and my spiritual maturity over the years now, many years now, I take my cues from Paul, right? That's where the word apologia comes from. He's in Athens talking to the Athenians, and he's given an apologia, a defense for the Christian ideology. And he wasn't performing miracles. He was reasoning people. He knew his audience better than they did. He knew their arguments as well or better than they did. And he gave them an apologia, a defense. He reasoned them. You know, you said this years ago, you probably remember saying it, but when we talk about Matthew 22:36, that love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, strength. Mind is a tool of worship. Mm-hmm. We forget it. Vodi Bachman said this one time. He said that in the United Negro College used to say the mind is a terrible thing to waste. And he says sometimes it feels like the Christian church says that the mind is a terrible thing, period. Like, you know, don't use your mind. And I never forgot he said that. I give him credit every time I say it. But it's true. Yeah. We don't reason ourselves. I mean, we give these sound bites. We say this is the way it is. Then when we're challenged on them, you get these 75 to 85% of young Christians that go off into an atheist or antagonistic environment, and they don't know what the hell they believe. Yeah. So like, oh shit, I mean, I'm wrong about this, I'm wrong about that. Maybe we're wrong about Jesus. Let's redefine him. Let's bring in some other worldview, which will get us to syncretism, which is defined by the American Heritage Dictionary as, I'll just read the definition: the reconciliation or fusion, combining of differing systems of beliefs. Right. So you're combining Christianity and something else, this with that, and you're kind of making this gumbo stew of ideology, right?
And there's nothing new about that. If you read Paul's instruction letters, this is 90% of them are railing against this. Yep. So he doesn't.
The Gnostic belief back then, right? There was
Gnosticism was one. It was amalgamation, but Gnosticism is basically a collection of sort of hyper spiritual, mystical, ancient beliefs, and Paul was worried that there was this marriage between Christianity and Greek Gnosticism. And man, it's hard to read a letter, whether it's Galatians in Corinthians or Galatians, or certainly he warns Timothy about that in both letters, in 1st and 2nd Timothy. It's really hard to read Paul's epistles, Peter's epistles, even without seeing that concern operating in the background. And so, R.A. Torrey, who was one of the early deans of Biola University, really the first dean, I think, he says, hey, we can't just speak the truth in love. We have to attack error. And he's really pulling that from his experience engaging in the epistles. Are we doing that today? Well, no, we're not. We don't have any ammo to fire with. There's nothing in our quiver. There's no arrows in our quiver here. If you look at this data, that's the problem. So what's filling that vacuum? What's filling that vacuum is other views. So that firewall of Christian doctrine, of what we believe about God, what we believe about Jesus, what we believe about sin, what we believe about, justification, regeneration, I just said that, salvation, all that stuff isn't there to say, wait a minute, that doesn't reconcile. I choose to believe what the Bible teaches. And so now we don't just resist it, we become agents of persuasion. What the hell do we have to work with?
And then when we talk about that lack of courage, not knowing what you believe, and what I've seen happen, especially over the last 10 years, 15 years maybe, is because we have no courage. Not everyone, I'm just saying in general, the church, we don't know what the hell we believe. You get somebody outside to just literally just say whatever bullshit they want to say.
Yeah.
And then it's like, I guess. Yeah. I mean, and then if a lie goes unchecked, as I always say, it becomes the truth. And so then when I hear people and I watch some of these debates or these conversations that wasn't set up as an official debate, and then someone says, well, you believe this, and I'm like, well, correct them. What are you talking about? And they just don't, well, yeah, but. Well, don't say yeah, but, and agree with them.
Yeah.
Say, wait a minute, you're just wrong. Stop. But before we go on, and you want me to answer your other question, I get the whole smoke and mirrors bullshit, but you're wrong about this. Don't make a claim. No, we can't defend Christianity or the biblical ideology. And that's why, as you know, over the years, I've gotten so passionate about Genesis. I just am. I'm passionate about Genesis.
Barna agrees with you. So let me just quote him here a moment. In all but one instance, when looking at this data and across these sort of generational categories, those changes showed Gen Xers moving away from biblical perspectives of behaviors. He's trying to say Christianity was weak before the pandemic, but it was particularly weak afterward. And he continues, in general, the nature of the spiritual transitions among Gen Xers during the pandemic era was a shift away from trust in God. Among the biggest changes in their religious perspective were declines in believing God created humans, that he is the basis of truth, and that he is the omniscient and omnipotent ruler of the universe. These doubts have precipitated important transitions in religious behavior, including less Bible reading, church attendance, confession of personal sin, repentance, seeking to do God's will, and worshiping God. And so he gets back and says that something replaced that. And what replaced it was this sort of reliance on government perspectives and policies.
Well, science became a religion, government ideology and partisan became a religion. I mean, LGBT became a religion. I mean, transgender became a religion. Everything's become a religion, and then Christianity has no answers.
Those are all views that are pushed by an increasingly hostile government to Christianity. I mean, 100%. American institutions have pushed these things.
100%.
And let's be very clear about there. What we're battling here isn't new. It's just a new emergence. It's a new variation on the theme of Marxism, right? This whole push for the collective. I cut a reel as I was driving. I was furious about something that I'd heard coming over on the radio. It just kind of, I hate to use the word triggered, but man, let's say it initiated an autoimmune response, as I like to say. And I heard a commercial, and they were talking about community. And in that, literally in that 15-second snippet, I must have heard the word community 4 or 5 times. And it dawned on me that that's really a manifestation of this cult of sort of erasing the individual, as we often talk about on Sidebar, diminishing the individual. It's all about the collective. It's all about sort of the status quo. It's become truly the highest goal. So there's a war on critical thinking, which is why we hammer the need to think critically. God redeemed individuals. Jesus didn't come to save a collective. He came to touch each individual uniquely in their lives with the truth of the gospel.
I remind people,
And then of course, redeemed individuals will lead to a redeemed society, because guess what? We can't do it alone. We
I always
rely on the
remind
body of
people,
Christ for that.
God's so big on the individual that he gives everybody a fingerprint. I mean, think about that. You've heard me. How many times have you guys heard me say this? I deal with fingerprints for a living, and you screw the snowflakes. But I mean, I look at fingerprints, and you think to yourself, you don't even really look at and see your fingerprint. You see it for whatever reason. You have to take them, but no one's ever had your fingerprint in the history of mankind. Of human beings, no one's ever had your fingerprint. And as long as God keeps humans on this earth, no one's ever going to have your fingerprint. Now, if that's not an intelligently designed way to remind you of the uniqueness of the individual, not to blend in the sense of to go along, to get along, the collective, yes, of course, he wants all people to be saved. The invitation is for all. It's for the collective. But the individual is beautiful and unique. And just like the sheep, matter of fact, the collective was fine. The individual is so important in Luke 15 that he went after the one sheep. And the 99 were fine. Well, I love that. You're exactly right.
Every single human being has a unique genetic code. It's called a genome. Every single human being, no question about it. You've got the genome of the mom, you've got the genome of the dad, and this new human being has their very own unique set of allele combinations, which are genes that are coded for specific information, i.e. your fingerprint. And so that's truly astonishing. Every single human being.
As you taught me over the years, at the zygote level. As soon as the sperm and the
fertilized egg,
boom, that's it. You have a zygote or zygote, whatever you want to pronounce it, zygote, and that's it. Every bit of your DNA is the same.
Your genome isn't changing, meaning adding at that point. You can have mutations, true enough, which is where you have a change in genetic information. But that's your complete genome there. And so I think that is fascinating. And I think we need to just continue to push back, man, on this bullshit of basically erasing your distinctives as a human being as created by God, but also then ultimately what you actually believe. It's sacred. And so, listen for the words though. Listen for the language. This is important. Community. I mean, you hear it all the time. Everything's about community. Your community, my community. I mean, you can't even there you have your own thought. There you have your own care, unless it's vetted through a community. The collective we talked about, collaborative. Like that's the highest goal, collaborativeness. I remember reading this crap in MBA school 20 years ago. We were reading the Harvard Business Review. I was hearing this whole notion of the highest possible goal in a corporate environment is collaborativeness. Well, shit, what happens if what you're doing collaboratively is stupid as hell, right? That there was this precipitous increase in an unwillingness for people to kind of pioneer, kind of venture and suggest new ideas. I mean, it's this idea of sacred cows making good burgers. Not today. So what's happening, Nico, is I think we're seeing a move away from Christianity and its cultural manifestation, which is really the best thing we've got is capitalism.
I think it's because people think that you have to be some goofy son of a bitch to be a Christian, that Christianity is not practical, that Christianity is anti-science, which science is just a means to test the truth, right? It's just a series of testing mechanisms. It's not, science is not an ideology. I'm a scientific thinker. Okay, that means you test things. Great, so do I. I'm an evidence scavenger. Yep. I'm a truth scavenger. That's God's character. He can't lie. Why he hates lying and deceptive and wicked schemes and all that stuff in Proverbs 6:16 is because he is truth. Period, end of story. So if you're going to test the truth, testify to the truth, and then defend the truth, great, and hopefully conform to it so you're not a hypocrite too. But I really hate, and I say hate deliberately, this false impression or this false conviction of the Christian ideology and ultimately of Christ. I mean, Jesus already suffered an innocent man once. I hate that he gets reconvicted over and over again for things he doesn't believe or doesn't do. And syncretism is part of it. We either try to water down Jesus or water down Christianity, or say Jesus isn't enough, so it's Jesus plus or Christianity light. That's the new mindset. Well, Jesus, your Jesus is cool, but Jesus plus something else. No, bullshit. It's just Jesus. And then 2, or Christianity, you don't want to be one of those Christians. Oh, I guess I don't. So let's just water down your Christianity a little bit. And that's what we're seeing. Yeah. And then these other ideologies or worldviews or religions are merging in to Christianity because we are addicted to being liked.
Yeah.
I mean, God forbid if someone doesn't like us. Even though Jesus says in this world you will have trouble, John 16:33, or if they hate you, don't forget they hated me first. Not that you're trying to be a dick. You're not trying to be hated, but it's going to happen when you tell people the truth. Hopefully you do it lovingly. Hopefully, Ephesians 4:15, speak the truth in love, do it boldly, 2 Timothy 1:7, not in fear. But you still have to do it if you truly love someone. And if we believe what we believe, and it seems like nobody believes it actually when you're down to 4%, but if we truly believe what we believe, how do you not tell people about the cure for cancer? How do you not? I mean, because if one thing we've all learned through all this last few years, I mean, hopefully people know that we're all leaving this earth. 100%. The only thing I can say, 2 things you used to say when I growing up in our generation, 2 things you have to do in life is what? Pay your taxes and die. Well, you don't have to pay your taxes. You'll have consequences, but you don't have to pay your taxes. But you do have to leave this earth. 100%. What do you believe happens at that time? Right? And if we really believe what we believe, that there's eternal separation from the creator, the architect of the universe.
Yeah.
As we study more, I don't know how a scientific person cannot believe in intelligent design. I just think that you lose all credibility when you think that body of yours and that body and all their bodies and just the specificity of the human body, the marvel of the human body and the cosmos and our universe. I was watching this on Joe Rogan. I was watching this clip where what is he, an astrophysicist? He was some chinito dude, he was a Chinese dude. There was an astrophysicist talking about that the universe is a miracle. He used that word, a miracle. And Rogan's like, huh? I mean, how specific it is. And we've heard that before, and other apologists talk about it. Stephen Meyer and Hugh Ross and all the other people that we like and enjoy. But he's just kind of this, he's not a Christian apologist. He's just an astrophysicist saying, this is pretty remarkable. From gravity to where we're at in the sun, the moon, the heat, the level, I mean, everything. We're either going to blow up or we're going to freeze or whatever. It's fascinating.
Before we found this ideology of the collective, this sort of anti-God worldview permeate through society, we started showing up and, I mean, really began the Marxification of education is really where it began. And it it sort of weaved its way into science. How can a scientist believe that? Because there's a religion. They're practicing religion to argue that religion is unscientific. In other words, it's metaphysical naturalism. It's the idea that's taught in every single university, not just in America, well, with very few exceptions, but virtually every single university, public or private, and even in many Christian universities, so-called Christian universities. Not just in America, but world over, this idea that science must confine itself, all scientific discovery must confine itself to naturalistic explanations. And so basically you're confined to the theory of evolution, period, end of story, and this idea that there is no first cause other than in the inherent power of molecules. Now that theory has failed on evidence. It truly has. Now I just want to be very, very clear, and I know we probably end up pissing off a bunch of people last time, but I got to just mention again, we are not making an argument for traditional young Earth creation. No. I think, frankly, and I say this respectfully, I think the movements behind that are cultic. Now there are wonderful people. There are sincere Christians. There are wonderful people. I know they're fantastic Christians.
You used to be a young Earth guy.
I used to be a young Earth guy. And it just fails. It just simply fails on evidence, not just hermeneutically. And I really don't want to hear, well, it just reads that way. I understand, but a lot of things read that way if you're coming at it from a preconceived notion. Yeah. It doesn't help, does it? And so, again, failing to recognize that the Bible is an ancient work that was written. It wasn't written to us. It was written to a different people.
That's right.
Ultimately, it was written for human beings.
And not in English
But it was
either.
written to different people.
That's right.
In a different cultural setting. And so I always tell people, if you want to understand the Bible truly and well, aren't you at least curious how the people to whom it was written to understood it? Aren't you curious about what the author had in mind?
Your
And
audience-
nobody gives a shit, to
your
be honest,
audience
in the
matters.
Christian church. You start talking about that and they'll glaze over. So if I say, I'm not a traditional young earth creationist, and here's why. Let's go into Genesis 1 and let's read it, and let's talk about terms. Let's talk about phrases. Let's talk about Hebrew. Let's talk about all those things. And yes, since it's talking about natural events, we have to talk about what we know from biology. People's eyes just completely glaze over when I start suggesting that, no, God did not create the earth in 6 24-hour calendar days, nor did he need to. Actually, that's actually not even necessary. I always ask people, and people, if you're listening and you're a traditional young earth creationist, who is the individual present in virtually all of Genesis 1? It's 31 verses. Genesis 1 through about verse 27, exactly verse 27. Who's present? How many people? None. God is the only one present. He's the only character. And why God would care about a stopwatch that binds him to 24 hours is frankly beyond me. Here's a God who's timeless. He doesn't care about billions
We're going
of
to
years.
get into this right now.
No, but I'm saying
passionate about it.
This is actually where it started.
No, I know.
So this syncretism.
Well, can I give context? I love what you're saying, George. Yeah. But what George is saying, so we've talked about before, we have data, and I'm going to give a big range because I don't want someone saying it's not exactly that. Anywhere between 70 and 85%. I'm expanding it. It's not that wide, but it's either 70 on the low end to 85% of young Christians that leave the roost and go to an atheist or secular university will walk away from the faith within 1 year. And you know what the studies are showing? It's on Genesis. And before we get to Jesus, we got to talk about Genesis because there's not Velcro on the book, on the library.
Yeah.
You got to talk about it.
Yeah.
And they're saying, we've heard horror stories, George, of professors saying, who here is a Christian in science, biology classes, whatever? I'm giving you a chance to drop out of class now because by the end of the semester, you will no longer be a Christian. Holy shit. My stupid ass, I'd be like, well, no, you may not be an atheist when we're done, but come on, I'm staying.
Yeah,
but our young people are not prepared for the battlefield of the mind and to spar with ideas. So that's why you're bringing this up and why we're so passionate.
What they do know is unfortunately wrong. What did Reagan say? It's not that my liberal friends are wrong. It's that so much of what they know is incorrect. and that's I think that's applicable here. And I don't mean to be demeaning.
But it's not to be disrespectful.
We try to defend the indefensible.
Right.
And then we're just locked into this corner. And then, yes, sir.
Sorry, locked into the corner. Go ahead.
We're locked into an indefensible corner. We're doing. Here's the problem. Here's why it's so addicting, because we're doing it to save Jesus. That's why. See, we're doing it because it's important that we please God, and I think it's the motivations I think are good,
Yeah.
generally speaking. And that just sort of like that's perpetual fuel in the tank.
Well, you and I teach on a second reason. Don't forget your thought, Jeff. If you want to bring something
Jeff's
up.
over there. He's ready to come.
Well, no.
No.
But what I'm saying is, but there's a second reason, because people assume
Trying to pull up
that if you
comments.
believe in an old Earth,
Yeah.
that you have to believe in evolution,
Right.
and we don't.
Of course not.
Now, here's what I tell to people, because there are theistic evolutionists. John Lennox, last time I checked, was a theistic evolutionist. Someone
Sure.
we both respect tremendously, unless he's changed his
A lot of
opinion.
Catholics are.
William Lane Craig is the theistic evolutionist, right? Last time we checked, or is he not?
Yeah, I
Okay.
would say that Craig is.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
and that's someone that we respect tremendously
Yeah.
as an apologist, a thinker, a philosopher, and as a follower of Christ.
And somebody we don't respect too much, but who I think has been respected is Francis Collins, who's the former director, I think, of the National Institutes of Health.
All I'm saying is it
Fauci's
doesn't-
boss.
Yeah, I mean, could God
Say
use
no more.
evolution? Absolutely, he can do whatever the hell he wants. He's just not
Yeah,
goofy. He's a God of order. There's a lot of evidence to what he's done, and we can defend the Bible evidentially.
Yeah.
And there's just no evidence. I mean, and I know it freaks people out. There's no evidence of evolution. David Berlinski, I mean, we've
Yes,
talked
of
about him
course.
before. He's agnostic at best. And he's a tremendous thinker, sarcastic as hell, and ridiculously intelligent. He is not a Christian at all.
very
And he
secular.
says, you cannot defend evolution. Stop it. David, what's the other David? He's another agnostic dude, a Jewish dude. Stephen Meyer, Berlinski had a nice conversation that I've watched over an hour long conversation. David, it'll come to me later, but he's a scientist dude or a computer dude, and he's a Jewish guy. He's not a Christian, and he used to be an evolutionist, and he's along with David now. So you have even non-Christians saying, look, it's the evidence is not there. You can't support it anymore. So we're not, just because we believe in an old Earth, that we don't believe in evolution because there's no evidence of it.
That's right.
Right? I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
Well, there's no compelling evidence.
Well, fair
there's
enough.
there's what's happening is that, again, metaphysical naturalism is again the idea that science, think about it. If you're a scientist, you're coming to any kind of scientific analysis and you're tipping the scales in favor of the idea. Operating in the background is this idea that whatever you discover, whatever an outcome may be, that the explanation has to be confined to a paradigm. And that's really not the point. That's not science. That's totally unscientific. Metaphysical naturalism is unscientific. That's why I said it's really more of a philosophy. It's more of a religion because that's philosophical. It's a worldview. It's the idea that science can go here and here, but it can't go there. Well, that's absurd. Science is simply a series of, you said, it's basically the rational pursuit of dependable knowledge about the natural world and its inferences. Well, that means that's pretty wide open, isn't it? Now, there are right ways to do it and there are wrong ways to do it. Right? There's a right way to do biology, a right way to do chemistry, a right way to do biochemistry, a right way to do physics. There are time-tested methods of analysis that you have to follow. True enough. But the idea that when you apply those methods, and there's maybe a suggestion that design is at play and not random mutation, that you can't consider that? That's nuts. That's not scientific. Now you're tipping the scales. There's nothing biological, there's nothing chemical about that.
You know, it's funny, George, but that's actually where I start with people when I discuss faith and God and ultimately Christianity. I don't start with the scriptures. I start with, let's start do you believe in intelligent design or natural selection through random mutation? And if they think, well, I believe in natural selection, so just randomness, all of this and specificity from one single cell organism that came from nowhere. So everything from nothing. I get that. Give me the logic. I mean, I ultimately take them down this path of you have more faith than I do. Now, if I can reason them through logic and through evidence to, okay, I believe in an intelligent designer. Okay, so do I. Let's just figure out who he is or she is or it is, whatever it is. Is it the God of the Bible? Is it Hare Krishna? Is it Allah? Is it Buddha? Whatever the hell, or is it some whatever the hell? Then let's just figure it out. But there's a designer. Fair enough. Now let's see what worldview and ideology, religion, quote unquote, supports that. And it's scripture.
Well, I think it's a good idea to start there. It's foundational, isn't it?
I agree.
Because if you're rejecting the idea that there is a God, period, and how do you make a compelling case for Christ? How do you do that? How do you make a compelling case that Christ Jesus inserted himself into human affairs to rescue mankind, to be the exclusive savior, to reconnect mankind through repentance, to reconnect mankind into a relationship with God, which was lost, dare I say, in the garden, which last time I checked happened like in Genesis, which is in Genesis chapter 2. So they're connected, aren't they? They're connected. What did I say to you years ago? If you lose them at Genesis, you're going to have a very weak Matthew to talk about. That's going to be problematic because it presupposes, everything hinges on itself. It presupposes the existence of God, but it also then presupposes the existence of a particular God. Because if you look at other religions, for instance, all kinds of pantheistic religions, God is nebulous. He either doesn't exist, as in the case of Buddhism, because Buddha was an atheist, or in the case of Hinduism, it's the idea that God is everything and everything is God. In fact, you're God. See, The reason why life is going so poorly for you is because you don't actually realize that you're God. That's the point. You don't actually realize that you're part of God. And so all this striving that causes you anxiety, it's because you're misguided. See, that's all it is. And so it's very works oriented. There's certain things you have to do.
Yeah.
Right?
Which is reincarnation and all that crap.
Okay, forgive me
Please.
for being devil's advocate, but I want to bring it back to what you guys were talking about at the
Proceed.
beginning. Professing Christians. Okay, the difference between a professing Christian and a legitimate Christian is even the legitimate Christian in his ignorance, if he believes in a young earth, if he's ignorant about it, a genuine Christian is going to look into it and seek after truth. The professing Christian who might not really know the Lord is going to abandon it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that there are plenty of people. Let me follow up on that, Jeff, because I know there's people thinking, oh my goodness, what are you saying? Are you saying I'm not saved if I don't hold to or if I hold to a traditional? We're not saying that.
No,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that.
Paul addressed, we talked about this in First Peter, I think. Look at 1 Peter chapter 2. I think that's a really example. We spent a show here about 3 or 4 months ago on this. Peter's addressing false teachers who weren't saved, but there are also people in that mix who were saved, but were in danger of being misled. There's all kinds of people in church who are saved, but misled. And life's rough when you're stupid. Life's particularly rough when you're deceived. And so, unfortunately, there's a lot of Christians who are deceived. Look, being deceived has benefits. Sin has benefits. You get to be comfortable. Mm-hmm. You get, what do they say? Ignorance is bliss. Mm-hmm. No, it might ultimately kill you, but at first it's bliss. It's got a sedating effect. I'm comfortable. I'm not nudged to change the way I live and think. And so I think that this traditional young earth creationism has just been what everybody in church has believed for so long, because I hate to say it, but it's still the dominant view. Now, it's falling out of favor, thank goodness.
Well, with the
it's decreasing significantly. Sorry to interrupt you.
No.
It's decreasing significantly, thank goodness, at the speed of light, thank goodness. But it still remains, I think, unfortunately, the dominant view.
Before the Big Bang was discovered, by looking back, of course people are going to hold that view because they don't have the tools to know. So, of course, 100 years ago, 400 years ago, people were kind of,
True, but Nico said it right. It's the idea that believing in the Big Bang theory is the same thing as believing in evolution. And some people call it cosmic evolution. I don't know how I feel about that. But the Big Bang is the first.
The Big Bang is the first cause. The Big Bang actually scientifically proves Genesis 1.
Back up a second. The Big Bang is the first effect.
Sorry, not the first cause. Yeah,
God is the first cause.
Yeah, God is the Big Banger, but the Big Bang is the first effect. I mean, it's Genesis 1.
Take it easy, people. We're not being sacrilegious here.
No,
okay?
I mean,
God is the Big Banger.
Come on. I mean, ease up a little. This is my point. If somebody really got offended by that, this is why people think Christians are idiots and corny. I mean, let's just be realistic. I mean, Genesis 1, in the beginning, God created, ex nihilo. God did not make. When you make a cake, you have existing ingredients, and then you put them together. You don't create a cake. We don't say that. We say, oh, they made a baby together, sperm and egg. We don't create things really much. We make them, or we build something. But creation is something different, to create from nothing. That is the Big Bang Theory, that something like 14.3 billion years ago, or whatever it is, that time, space, and matter can be extrapolated back to a single point in time, where literally scientifically we can prove, evidentially, that time, space, and matter cease to exist. So if time, space, and matter cease to exist at some point in the past, then something outside of time, space, and matter must have created time, space, and matter.
Correct.
Whoever created this iPhone is outside the iPhone. Whoever put that iPhone together, it's not in the iPhone. They're outside of it. And so time, space, and matter cease to exist. Something outside of time, space, and matter created that, and that's God. And it's in Genesis. So science finally caught up to the Bible.
That's
once
right.
again.
And when we go through this in our Genesis
scientific?
seminar, we go through methodically from verse 1. We talk about how that's a loaded verse, Genesis 1:1. It is so foundational, so critical, and it's just kind of glossed over. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, the totality of the physical universe. And the word, it's Bereshit bara Elohim. In the beginning, God created. And that word created is truly, as you said, creation ex nihilo. There was actually nothing there.
Yeah.
And,
Can I
this is
interrupt?
really the subject of Einstein's great work in 1905 and 1915 with general and special relativity. Go ahead.
I am sorry to interrupt, but it's like everyone in the comments, like they're almost like baffled that y'all would hold a view. I mean, can I just read some of these comments?
Yeah,
if you
sure,
don't mind?
guys. I mean, look, we got to pop the bubble a minute sooner or later. I can't believe it.
Someone, Janet wrote, and we're not trying to be offensive or anything. We're just going to read it as is.
It's okay.
But Janet wrote, I look around and see a young earth, not an old one. Deborah said, I would like you to have a program on this, the old versus young earth.
Sure.
Valerie said, I wish you collectively would debate a Christian scientist on your show who believes in creationism. Debbie said, isn't that why it's called the theory of evolution theory? And then Janet said, I would, let me see. Oh, Henry says, now you guys sound like Fauci. Believe the science. Deborah says, why do you guys say that the Bible isn't written to us? That was a different topic, but they're almost baffled that you guys would hold a view that's almost like, going against the grain.
Deborah that said that? Hey, Deborah, did Moses write Genesis to you? I mean, come on. Moses wrote the book to whom?
It's for us, not to us.
Right. It's for the human race,
That's
truly,
right.
but not
That's right.
but not to us. He wrote it to an audience. For
Look, guys,
goodness sakes.
can I just say
Right?
this?
When you
respect-
argue
look,
that,
we love
who did
these-
Paul write to in when he wrote? Sorry, Nico.
okay.
When he wrote the Thessalonians, did he write to Deborah, excuse me, or did he write to the Thessalonians? When Peter was writing to in First Peter. When he was writing to the newly saved Christians in Northwest Asia Minor, was he writing to you? That's what I mean. So we have to understand. Those are letters or epistles. We have to understand who was he writing to and what did he have in mind.
But hold on,
All I'm saying is we spend no time on that stuff, and we read it through our lens. That's problematic.
Well, what do we do? And guys, and I say this, look, and all those people, I've recognized their names. They're regular watchers.
And we appreciate that very much. We really do.
much appreciate it. What do you benefit? Why is that your sacred cow? Why does it have to, the Genesis, and we'll say this too, and I'm just,
Good question. Keep going.
Genesis 1 is not a salvation issue.
Yeah.
But to me, it's a credibility issue. And I'm telling you, the battlefield is there. We're not old earth believers because we want to be or we're trying to be liked. Anyone that watches this show knows we're not afraid to be disliked or hated or whatever. Matter of fact, just FYI, our sidebar Instagram account was erased, done.
Kaput.
We've offended the Instagram gods. We are off Instagram forever. So just FYI. And we've been shadow banned on here many times over. So we're not going along to get along. We're not peacekeepers. We're peacemakers. Matthew 5 says to be a peacemaker. That means try your best to make peace with all men without compromising the truth. But why is it ask yourself this. Why is it so sacred to you? Why is that the dividing line? It's not a salvation issue. But do we want to properly handle God's word? I know the answer is yes. I understand that it offends certain people's, their traditions or the way they were raised. I didn't know what the hell I believed initially. I got into some debates. I could not back it up with evidence. I'm an evidence scavenger. So is George, as a scientist, me as a trial lawyer. The evidence doesn't support a young earth. I don't know what you mean by I look around and I see a young earth. I don't understand. Have you studied trees? And have you studied rocks? Have you studied the Cambrian explosion? Dinosaurs? I know some people believe dinosaurs were on the ark. How do you support that? You just don't. Ken Ham says that the baby dinosaurs were because there's not a lot of room, not the big ones. He's making that up. I don't know where he's getting that from. We have to be credible, guys. Jesus was credible. He engaged people in their thoughts, their minds, and he lived it out. We, as defenders of Christian faith, we've got to 2 Timothy 2:15, properly handle the word of truth. And the truth sets you free, John 8:31-38, right? So we have to do that. If the truth was that the age of the earth seemed to be young, I would say it.
Yeah, of course. Why wouldn't we?
If the truth and the evidence led that there was evolution, I would argue evolution.
We say everything else that pisses people off, like you said. Why would we make an exception?
It's
for
the
that?
same thing with the end times. Everyone has different views there.
If those were the facts, then we would argue those facts. And the comment, Henry, thank you, Henry, you always watch. I don't know what that comment means about Fauci. I think Fauci is a excuse my language, I'm gonna use some more F's, a fucking idiot. And so I don't care about Fauci. I don't know if that's a swipe or you're teasing or you're busting chops. I don't know. But I don't care about Fauci. If Fauci was right, I'll agree with him. If Fauci's wrong. If Trump's right, I'll agree with him. If not, I'll excoriate him. If Biden's right, I'll agree with him. If Biden's wrong, I'm a truth, because I care about what he thinks. That's it. Not what you think, not what anybody else thinks. I care what God expects of me, because when it's all said and done, we're all going to stand before God by ourselves with Christ as our Savior next to us, looking at his record, not ours. Now, this is not a salvation issue. I assure you, there's nothing in that collection of books, all 66 of them, that we will stand before the white throne of judgment and God will say, or if you have a traditional, St. Peter at the gate will ask you, I'm joking, will say, you young earth or an old earth believer? Well, I believe in an old earth.
Pre-mill or post-mill?
No one, I can make it a little bit, no one's going to do that. But in the battle for the mind, in the battle for hearts and souls, in the battle to stop the dwindling, we've got to be realistic. We've got to be practical. Look, how many people don't listen to us because we say shit and this and that or whatever? We use some hyperbole. We've got to properly handle the word of truth. We've got to follow the evidence wherever it leads us, because that's God's character. God is the truth. He is the truth, by the way. So I'm baffled back. I never stop being baffled of why this is such an issue. And I really think it ties back.
I think it's really well said, but getting back to this debate,
I love all you guys for watching.
This is always what comes back. See, this is what always comes back, and I mean this respectfully. Well, why don't you debate some, how come you don't do that? I mean, this is a fundamental, right? You believe that everything hinges on that.
By the way, we have.
Give us your best argument.
But George, we have.
I've spent 30 years, I was a traditional young earth creation. I've spent 30 years, well, actually about 25 years, debating. And it's a really short debate, by the way, because, and I know Ken Ham's organization, Answers in Genesis, they do a lot of good work, but they need to stay far away.
She was asking
far away
from Norman Geisler.
Genesis.
Norman Geisler, we love him.
What about Norman Geisler?
She says, what about biblical scholars?
That's right. Norman Geisler is not. He's absolutely not.
He's not a young earth.
She claims he is, but we'll see.
Okay, I'm sorry. That's just not accurate.
Norman.
Look up his. He's got a great book out there called the Big Book on Christian Apologetics, and he makes no such claim.
No,
he takes
doesn't.
no such position.
Norman's great, by the way.
Absolutely not.
The reason that changed my mind was going to y'all's seminar, and obviously y'all broke down like the hermeneutics, Yom, all the stuff that you guys broke down, the Cambrian explosion, all the stuff you talked about. And it was,
and we go
for
verse
me,
by verse.
For
right?
me, it was hard to let go of the old earth mentality because you hold on to it for so long.
Young earth, you mean?
It was for me too. I lost relationships.
To let go of the
young
young
earth.
earth, yeah, to let it go. But I think again, the genuine Christian is willing to admit when they're wrong and say, you know what, I'm gonna follow what truth says.
But at least, don't even admit. Just say, hey, I don't know. I got to a point I didn't know what I believed, and then I went to Catholic University, and then they started introducing Catholics. At St. Mary's, they talked about evolution. Father Elias, it was a class. I'm not trying to badmouth him. I don't know if he's still with us or not, but he said the Catholic view is as long as you believe that God breathed life into a group of primitive tribe or people or a couple, then you're good with Genesis. Yeah. So Adam and Eve is not specific. I believe in Adam and Eve.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not trying.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I absolutely believe that they're historical persons. Jesus says so. I believe it. But there's also no reason we shouldn't believe that from a genetics perspective.
Well, then from the science kind of backs it up now, right?
Molecular clock analysis is every single year, because it's still in its infancy. Every single year, because of genetic sequencing technology, we're able to see how the sort of original population of human beings gets smaller and smaller and smaller. But here's how some of those debates have gone. I'll say, tell me your best argument. Well, it says it right there. I'm just reading out of the scripture. Please tell me. It says day. Right, exactly. And I said, do you know that day means different things? Not just throughout the Old Testament, but in Genesis. Are you aware of that? And I either get one of two answers. No, I didn't know that. You're full of shit.
Yeah.
And then I'll explain to you examples of where it does. Or they'll say, yes, but not here. Well, I don't understand. Why not here? And then what they'll do is they'll rely on answers in Genesis or the Institute for Creation Research. And they'll go and pull, and I'll tell you, a con man out there in this regard is Jonathan Sarfati. I think he's got a book called Refuting Compromise. And what he does there is he basically talks in circles, and the only thing he refutes is his own fallacious arguments, because he uses hermeneutics that are completely made up. He's literally, this is what's happening. These people are pulling stuff out of their ass. And if you actually go to biblical scholars like Gleason Archer, who's not only a linguist, I mean, we lost, that guy's with Jesus now, but I'm sorry that we lost him. He was one of the greatest 20th century theologians. Gleason Archer, for instance, is not only a linguist who can handle biblical languages, could speak in them, but wrote books on them. And he refuted this nonsense that has to be a 24-hour calendar day.
Well, but George,
so let me give you an example. May I give some examples?
Yes, I want to ask you a question before we wrap up.
So for you guys listening in, just out of curiosity, are you aware that the very same word, which is yom, that the very same word that's used throughout Genesis 1, are you aware that if you argue that it means a 24-hour calendar day, look up, Genesis 4:3 or Deuteronomy 10:10. Are you aware that it means time there and not day? How about in 1 Kings chapter 1, verse 1? Are you aware that it means age there? Or how about Genesis 18:11? Are you aware that it means year there? Or how about in 1 Samuel chapter 9, verse 20? I think it means always there. So there's a variety of terms,
but George, as we
expressions depending on the context. Go ahead.
As we say in the seminars, we do it today. If I say, hey, back in the day, I used to do X, Y, or Z, no one would say, which day? Which 24 hour? Well, back in this period of time, I'm going to drop my kid off at daycare. They're going to be there for 24 hours? No, just during the work hours. I spent the day with George. You spent all 24 hours with George? No, I spent the majority of the day with George. Okay, well, no, you said day. We do it in our English language, and we can't do it in Hebrew, and Hebrew had less words than we do. We just really gotta really open our minds and understand what we're really arguing. But for me, George, the low-hanging fruit that nobody that believes in a young earth mindset answers, and there's an answer, by the way, and you're going to give us the answer now, is what does it say at the end of each day? Evening to morning, day 1. Evening to morning, day 2. That's a phrase, a particular term of art, a phrase that used in Hebrew, right? That meant what, George?
Well, you've got in the evening and morning doesn't mean 24-hour calendar day, because in Hebrew, the Hebraic term wouldn't be that. Because when does day start? If you're a Hebrew, it starts at about 6 o'clock, and it ends the following day. So that's the point, I think, is that they wouldn't have used that terminology. Right. It would have made no sense to a Hebrew to assume that that's a 24-hour calendar day. So I think we need to step back, and we need to reread Genesis with some understanding and try to put our lens. I know it's difficult because it's what Walt Russell, a scholar Walt Russell, calls an interpretive community, where we interpret the Bible through our own little cluster, our own little club. And so those are the rules that we bring to the table. And I think we ought to read the Bible with fresh eyes. May I make a recommendation? You guys should read Dr. Hugh Ross's Navigating Genesis. I think it remains the premier book out there on this. It's not easy to read. I think he speaks very pastorally, and it's heavily footnoted, but it's pastorally written, and it's beautifully written. You guys should read it. I would challenge you guys, if you guys, it probably costs about $15. If somebody can't afford it right now, because it's just a bad time for you, please let us know. I'll have one shipped to you. Our cost, we'll take care of it. Seriously, I'm dead serious. If there's anybody else, let me know, and we'll have them shipped. We'll have them shipped to you.
If there are young Earth creationists that are listening, they're just having this hard time getting over that hump, I would say start with a mixed view of you can have an old Earth and still have a young young humanity. You don't have to believe that Adam and Eve was like a million years ago or whatever. You can believe that the humanity is still relatively young compared to the old Earth. You can hold both views. If that's what causes people to hiccup is because the Earth is old, therefore that must mean mankind is millions and millions of years old.
You just don't get there. You don't get to the different ethnicities and the distinctions between us and the different adaptations of human beings with 6,000 years. You just don't get there.
Yeah.
I mean, so Adam and Eve were not created 6,000 to 10,000 years ago. It just doesn't get. You don't get there, and you lose all credibility.
It's all interesting to us because we care about this stuff.
It's kids care about this.
Yeah.
Forget me.
No, why do we bring this up? Because this is where we're losing. This is precisely an example
This is where this starts.
of where we lose them.
Yeah.
Because we should go against the grain, but not for the hell of it. We should go against the grain because God cares deeply about it, and there's no compromise. Like, for instance, all of this intensity that I'm hearing, what about on issues of gender, for example? That's what we really ought to be thinking about right now, because they're being converted left and right. Yeah, those things,
Abortion.
God has certain non-negotiables. The idea that sex is between a man and a woman in a monogamous, sort of mutually supportive relationship. And yes, dare I say, kids come out of that. Something that is impossible with any other type of relationship. So we ought to be falling on that sword. On issues of gender,
But I think
we ought to be talking about that. Right? How about sanctity of life? There's something the church has sprinted from over the last 30 years. That's the kind of stuff.
Not 2 Thessalonians 2.
Well, look,
not the idea
you
that
guys
carbon
have been
dating is
patient
fallacious
here.
and mythical.
We've gone over, and I hope you've enjoyed Look, guys, the bottom line is this. These debates are good. We should be able to have family discussions. We should be able to disagree, iron sharpening iron, sitting down and reasoning with each other, always pursuing truth to honor God, not making shit up, and just following the truth wherever it leads us, because that pleases God and it's His character.
Can we practice that as you wind up, just real quick? Guys, email in, text in, whatever the means for communicating with us here are on R-Rated. Give us your best argument. Find us your best scholar and make the best argument. I don't want a book. It shouldn't be that complicated. If it's that complicated to explain, then I think that's a problem. It's really sort of what Einstein used to say, the simplest explanation is usually the correct one. So find me your best concise argument for a 24-hour calendar day in Genesis 1. And share it. Tell me what you think is sort of the death knell, okay? And let us respond to that.
But here's the deal, guys. I mean, let's just get better at our arguments and our discussions, so we can ultimately we want to lead people to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Really?
That's it for me.
Yeah.
So when I discuss Genesis with people, and look, I've had the pleasure and the honor of speaking to a lot of young people in high school, grade school, and college, and this is top of their mind. And when people say you Christians are not scientific, you Christians deny science, you Christians are a bunch of weirdos, whatever, they're talking about Genesis. There's nothing else. And I'd say, man, science actually supports a biblical worldview when you really think about it. And then I turn it on them and I give them the old catucci, as I say. And so all I'm saying is my goal by our advocacy, whether it's podcasting, whether it's studying knowledge and truth and understanding the scripture and really knowing what God expects of us and wants us to know and what our duties are in life, is really to draw people to Christ. Because in the end, if we really love people the way God says to love your neighbors yourself, it's not loving to let them drift off away. And I want to hook them. I want to fish, and we have to fish with knowledge in our minds, because the mind is truly a terrible thing to waste. So that's it. Thanks for the discussion. Thanks for the questions. We appreciate the pushback. I hope it was beneficial to you too. To Debbie or Valerie's point, we will do another show. We've done this on the past, by the way, guys. We're happy to do it again. We can do another show on this if you guys really want to. Let us know, write in. But have a blessed week, and thanks for staying up late with us.